Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another how-to video. I'm recording this on November 11th, 2015. In this chapter, we are test driving our tabs library, and in the last episode, we had just finished doing a bunch of refactoring. We modified our tabs production code to use the class list property, and we also modified our test to use a container to contain all of our test elements. That means that cleanup is a lot simpler because it can be handled for us by this after each function. Now in this episode, I'd like to continue through that loop again, the TDD loop of think, red, green, refactor, repeat. So we've got a couple of questions about how we might want to clean up the code, but it's not obvious to me how to do that. So let's see what feature we can add next. What code do we want to add to our code next? Well, when I look at this, we've got right now the initialize function is just removing an element. Or really, it's not even doing that much. What it's doing is just adding a class name to an element. And eventually what we're going to want this to do is to remove all the elements or add the hidden class to all the elements and to mark one of these tabs as activated. So what can we do to move closer to that? Well, there's the concept of hidden or active and inactive content divs. But I think actually, given where we're at right now, just hiding all content divs that were passed in would be a nice small step. It basically builds on what we have so far. And then from there, we can, rather than hiding the inactive content div, we can not hide the active content div. And then from there, we can go to marking a tab as active. And then after that, maybe deal with clicks. But I'm thinking this is what we will do next. And that shouldn't be too hard. It just means getting a bunch of elements to hide and looping through them and marking them all as inactive. So let's go ahead and write a test for that. Let's say that it hides all multiple elements by setting a class on them. And that actually makes me think that it'd be good to rename these classes, these tests as well. So let me go ahead and make sure that we haven't broken anything with that simple test. And we haven't, no surprise there. And let's say that, let's see, how do we want to do this? I'm actually wondering, let's say it hides an element by setting a class. Setting the class when it has no existing classes. And it hides an element by setting the class, by adding a class when it does have existing classes. Is that good? I'm not sure. Then we could say it hides multiple elements. And because we've already talked about setting the classes up here, I think we can just say hides multiple elements, and somebody reading this will be able to understand what's going on here. Again, these tests are a form of documentation, so as I'm writing them, I think about how can I make it really easy to understand what's going on. Now, in order to hide multiple elements, we'll need multiple elements. So I'm going to make element 1 and element 2 and element 3 by just duplicating that line. And then somehow we're going to need to pass in those elements and the name of the class. And then we're going to need to assert somehow that those elements are hidden. A bunch of things here. Well, to start out with, I think the way I want to pass in, now remember in the red bar state, what we're doing is design. So here I need to think about how I want the initialize function to be called. I think because the elements that we want to hide, the content divs, are all one concept, rather than passing them through as multiple parameters, I want to pass them in as array. So let's say that we have element 1, element 2, and element 3. But if I do that, that changes the way initialize works, which means that our existing tests are going to expect something different. Now, I could program this initialize function to take either an array or an element, but I think it would be simpler to just have it always take an array. Because really, when we're working with this tab application, we're not going to have just one tab in most cases. Let me go ahead and run what we have now. I think this will break. Yeah, it's breaking. It's saying unable to get the value of property add, object is null or undefined. That's happening at tabs line 10 right here. It's a little hard to understand. It's saying add doesn't exist because class list is undefined. What's happening here is class list doesn't exist on the array. So you can see it's only occurring on tab hides multiple elements. So I think what I want to do is, before I do an assertion on this, I want to just get this to pass. The way I'm going to do it is by making all of these arrays and then changing this code to work with an array. So now all of our tests should be failing. And in fact, they are. 3 of 3 failed. And then what we can do is just get the element out. We'll change the name of this to element list. And then the element will simply be the first one. So there's a little refactoring of sorts that basically gets us back to where we started, except now we're passing an array through rather than an element. Of course, that doesn't solve the problem of, are these elements hidden? So let's go ahead and do that next. I'm going to go the quick and dirty route to start with and just say that we expect each element to have hide class on it. But you can see the way I just did all that duplication, that to me says that we've got some refactoring to do. And in fact, let me go ahead and make a note of that. Refactor, let's get rid of the duplication in the multiple elements test. But that will work for now. We expect the class of element 1 to be hide class, the class of element 2 to be hide class, and so forth. And I'm going to go ahead and put in a message on each of these asserts. The asserts take a third parameter, which is a message, which you can use to simply make it easier to tell which assertion has failed in a given test. So if I run this, I'm expecting the first one to work, but the second one to fail. And that's in fact exactly what's happening. Element 2 got null where we expected hide class. And the reason the first one worked is because we are pulling out that first one. So now what we need to do is we need to loop through every element in the array. We can do that by using the for each function on any array. You can say elementlist.forEach. That says for each element in the list, run a function. And we'll pass in a function. And that function will take an element. And then for each of those elements, we'll want to add the class list, just like we do here. So I'll go ahead and take that and put that there. And we should no longer need that. So this is a bit of functional style programming that we have here in JavaScript. We're saying in the element array, we're calling the for each method, which takes as a parameter a function. And then it will, for each element in the array, it will just loop through the array and call the function we pass in for each element. And it will pass in the element that it's looping over right at that moment. So this is effectively the same. If you're familiar with for loops, this is effectively the same as saying for I equals 0, I less than element list.length, I plus plus, element equals element list I, and then element.classlist.add class name. These are basically the same thing, except that you're not allowed to put vars inside of for loops in JavaScript, or at least Lint won't let you do it because it's really doing that. These two approaches are identical, but this one is a little more compact and also has the advantage of any variables you use inside the loop are isolated from the external function. So I tend to prefer this approach. Anyway, Let's see if this works. Hopefully it will. Fingers crossed. There we go. So now we've taken care of multiple elements. Let's go ahead and do that. There we go. Okay, time to refactor. How can we make this better? Well, I don't like all this duplication. And I don't like this get class that we're using here. And I've mentioned this before. We talked about using the class list rather than get attribute. On the other hand, by looking at the entire class attribute, I think it makes it more clear what's going on. And we do need one equal for each element. I think I don't think this is as bad as I thought it was at first, actually. But I do look at this and think this could be made more clear. Let's do this. Let's put this one second, because I think it tells a better story if we say hides an element by setting a class. So tabs hides an element by setting a class. It hides multiple elements, and it preserves existing classes when hiding an element. So you notice I'm spending a lot of time thinking about language here and how it's written and coming back to it over and over. And this is something that I hope you will do as well, because it's very hard to come up with good language the first time. And this right here, this choice of words, our choice of variable names, all of these sorts of things, these are how you communicate with your successors. With everybody who comes into the code after you, your mechanism for communicating is the code. And because it's difficult to communicate with code, because you're also trying to make it actually do something, it warrants time spent on it. And I think you'll see that as you spend more time on it, you'll come up with better ideas, just like I am here. Even better is to do pair programming where you get two people thinking about it. But the more clear you can make the code, the easier you make it to maintain for somebody in the future. And that someone could well be you, and you'll appreciate it if you take the effort now. All right, well, I think that as I'm looking at this code, I feel like it's starting to tell a story and is getting to be pretty good. So let's go ahead and look back here. I don't think I want to use class list instead of get attribute class. I like what we've got there. And I don't think we actually have that much duplication. What I am going to do, and we already have a get class function, so that's good. I think what I'll do is just rename this to get classes. And I could manually go through and type get classes on each one of these, but I'm going to use WebStorm's built-in refactoring tool, which is on the Mac, Command Option R. And on Windows, I believe it's Control-Shift-R. And I'm going to rename this function, and you'll see how it's renaming everywhere it's used. It's a really nice feature of a modern IDE like WebStorm. I think get classes speaks more clearly than get class here. Yeah. Let's make sure that we didn't break anything. Nope. We're all good. So we've taken care of our duplication. I don't think it was that bad. And we've hidden all of our content divs. Now it's time to go through the loop again. It looks like what we're going to do next is hide everything except for the active div. We'll do that in the next episode. For now, your exercise for this time is to go ahead and implement this multiple elements feature. Add a test to test for multiple elements and modify your existing code to work with multiple elements. As usual, for those of you doing the challenge exercises, your challenge is to figure out how you want to approach the next loop of the cycle. As usual, take small steps and see how you can write your tests in just a few lines of code and your production code in just a few lines of code. We'll tackle that next time. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.